Hi everyone, this is Mary and Stephanie, and we're going to speak to you today about sampling, which is the next unit in our research methods class. To begin, we'll give you a few highlights. You're going to be looking for sampling design within your research. So when you look, you should go straight to the method section because that's where sampling design is usually placed. And you'll know this because the first thing they'll do is they'll talk about the number of participants and where they receive those participants. So who are the participants? The participants are the people that the researcher wants to make assumptions about. Within this section, they'll also talk about the sampling design, and it could be non-probability or probability design. So these are three of the components that you're going to look for when you are reviewing your literature to find the elements of sampling design. But let me bring it down a little bit deeper into a flowchart so you can see the process and the steps that a researcher goes through in order to design a sampling section. So, of course, it's located under the method section, which we said, but the first thing that they'll note are the participants. So, who are the participants? Why did they gather information? So what's the rationale? Why are those particular people chosen to be mentioned in the research design? And where did they come from? Since this is a DevEd course and we're looking at community colleges for the most part, would the source of participants come from across the college? Would they come from a specific cohort? Would they come from a course? Would they come from across the college? So that representative sample will really depend on the purpose of the study itself. The researchers are also going to look at the appropriate number of participants. So if they're surveying a large group of students across college, they're going to want to make sure that there's enough people to actually make the study valid. But more importantly, and something that's a little bit trickier to look for, is the sampling design. So you'll have two types to note. So there's a non-probability design and a probability design. For non-probability sampling design, the researcher may choose to use either convenience sampling or criterion sampling. Or if they're doing a probability design, they're going to choose a random sampling method to gather information about the study. So one of the first steps when you're looking for the participants, see if you can find information about how the researcher selected the participants. Was it from a small cohort? Was it from a larger pool? And then why did they select those participants? How are those participants directly related to the intended research? And then what was the source of the participants? Where did the researcher find the participants? Did they look across a community college setting, across the nation, or did they limit it to one community college or three community college, or did it even go down a little bit smaller and discuss participants that were involved in a particular cohort or invested in a new pilot or program design? So when you're looking at the number of participants, you want to make sure that you have a group that represents the whole. So you want to make sure that all of the participants are familiar with the research, involved in the research, so that they're not lending any bias or non-experience, unless that's the intention, into the research data. So how many do we need? Usually you need a statistically significant amount of people to make the study reliable and valid. For your sampling design, so you can either look for non-probability or probability design. Quantitative studies. For this program, we'll most likely use convenience sampling, criterion sampling, or simple random sampling. There are more categories that exist, but these are the three most common ones. Here's an example of convenience sampling in quantitative research. So again, it's a non-probability design, but the researchers will choose the participants on the basis of accessibility. And here's an example. A researcher may use his or her college to survey available developmental education students and faculty to gather diverse opinions on differentiated instruction. And so what does that mean, availability? Well, that means that those are the ones that are closest in context or within reach of the researcher. So there is some criteria that's usually related to convenience sampling, and that they should be closely related and have information about the study itself. But again, the idea is to gather diverse opinions from across the college. Criterion sampling is a different one. So this is also a non-probability design, and it's designed around a predetermined criteria. So, for example, a researcher seeks to measure the successful completion of students in an accelerated learning course. Well, those participants in the study are only going to be chosen based on their particular enrollment in the accelerated course. So this is kind of a seek and find method where researchers in the forefront know exactly what voices they want to represent in their study, and they define where they are getting these participants from, the relationship to the study, and the number of participants. So this is pre-planned, and it's very clearly defined voices that represent the larger group. Then there is random sampling. So random sampling in a quantitative study is another one of the more popular ones, and it's a probability design, which means all participants have an equal opportunity to engage in the study. For example, a researcher holds 25 interviews and randomly selects 25 names out of a hat to complete a survey. So it's not a criterion sampling because there is no program that's vetted. They want a cross-section of positions and understanding to lead to their research. And it's randomly anybody. It could be 25 faculty members who are on a roster for those that are involved in first year experiences out of 100, and it could be just any 25 that they pick. Or it could be a numbering system. So you get a list of 150 faculty, and they choose every third faculty member to participate in the study. So when you're in your sampling section, this is an example of one that I pulled from my research, and this is from the Yager article on accelerated learning. And if you look at the very first sentence, the researchers say that they identified students who participated in each college's accelerated learning program. And they did that using transcript data. So that's an example of criterion sampling design because they only wanted participants in the community college that were involved in the accelerated study. So who were the source of the participants? That's the second yellow piece. So the source were any students who attended an accelerated learning program and then were designated as program participants within that particular cohort. And then they also the researcher clarifies the number of participants. In this sampling section, they didn't give an exact number, but they did say at each college, some students attempted the target course. And out of those students that attempted the target course and may or may not have completed successfully, because they were involved in the cohort, those were the ones that are going to be used as study participants. So we have a reference list if you want to go in and you want to look at a figure more in depth. There's also, within some of the links to the figures, there's also some general examples of what criterion looks like, or random sampling. So you can also get ideas from different fields when you go in there, just to get some more perspective on what sampling design looks like. We, of course, went and looked at the Creswell and Creswell book, but you do have to kind of search around there because It's not one specific section in the book that talks about sampling. Instead, you would have to go to many chapters and piece it all together. But there's also Surviving Your Dissertation, a comprehensive guide to content and process. And in that article, they give you lots of great examples and methodologies to create a sampling design for yourself. So I hope that's helpful to you. Let me know if you have any questions. You can reach out to Stephanie or I, and we will be providing extra resources to help you search for your sampling design within your own literature. Have a good night, everybody.